Hey! Previously on the channel, we've looked at some of the times white men pretending to be indigenous in some way had been trying to attack Scooby-Doo and the gang. But there was a classic episode that featured real indigenous characters finally for a surprising step up that I referenced the last time, and with a pretty memorable setup and title. I thought it would be fun and interesting to step back around to that again to see how the show made the switch to actual Native Americans and playing with indigenous folklore ideas in theory, but not technically pulling from the real pairs they could have. If you know, you know. The villain might be fiction, but maybe there's at least more effort with better representation. We're late into the original era this time, for what's now consolidated into the third season of the Scooby-Doo Show. That of course originally aired as part of a new run of Where Are You at the time, and themed as a third season of it. So this episode's home video releases are exclusively the original third season set, and any complete releases such as the Blu-ray for Where Are You. Today we're in fact on the third season premiere, Season 3, Episode 1. Watch out! The Willawaw! You have to say it like that. This one originally aired September 9th, 1978. So what is a Willawaw? I guess we'll have to find out, because like I said, it's not really from indigenous folklore, which tends to be pretty frightening. I'd like to see the gang go up against some of that and survive. As for the word Willawaw though, it's actually no better than the indigenous characters of the show usually turning out to be white men. It's suspected it comes from the word Willawaw, spelled slightly differently, which means a sudden violent squall blowing offshore from a mountainous coast, and certainly somewhat fits today's villain when we get to it. While it's not known where the word originates, it is known to first be used in the 19th century by white British seamen. So all that spooky folklore we could use, and we're borrowing a word from white men again to make something up anyway. We're also visiting another relative of Velma's, an uncle to be exact, who vanishes, just like the last time they went to visit one of her uncles, only to find him missing. Maybe they should stop visiting her relatives at this point. Last time it was The Curse of Viking Lake, an episode from the prior season. Go check out that video if you haven't seen it. It's a good episode. We also don't know where we head to find her uncle here, but it's suspected to probably be Upper Michigan due to the indigenous characters we see later. And no, none of the indigenous people are voiced by such. In fact, one of them is Lenny Weinrib, who in the very next series or season of Scooby would take on the role of Scrappy-Doo. Not much else to prepare us for this outing. Let's go ahead and jump on into this mystery. Often the case, this episode opens up on another dark and very stormy night. The gang have made a bad choice even more than usual, being on this tiny little rickety boat, trying to reach Velma's uncle. I'm sure there was a better way, or at least could wait for the storm to be over. Daphne and Velma just standing there nonchalantly as well is kinda badass, not gonna lie. Anyway, Velma insists they hurry because she's worried about Uncle Dave, since he promised to meet them at the village and never showed, indicating something probably being wrong. I doubt he'd want his young niece and her friends out here regardless. Shaggy sees a big wave about to hit and yells for Scoob to get down, so obviously Scoob gets up higher to sea and gets waterboarded. Velma finally sees the landmark they were looking for, these Native American picture rocks, which Dave's lodge should be across the bay from. Just as they think they're safe, they see this thing flying in from a distance, a big fat round owl monster just soaring through the sky and over top of them. They get serious and head to Dave's lodge, very beautifully painted here per usual with this wonderfully atmospheric look. With the blowing leaves as they arrive on land, the feel of this episode really is superb. Unfortunately, as they head off to look for old Dave, some shadows seem to follow, though clearly just a couple of indigenous folks, so it's probably fine. Velma calls into her uncle's door, but nobody answers, and he's left it unlocked, which is very out of character for him. Fred lights a lamp and they see everything in disarray, but I especially love Daphne's reaction.
Ew, it's a mess!
Was the ew necessary? Anyway, it's clear something did in fact happen to poor Dave. He left his dinner out unfinished and everything. Doesn't get more obvious than that. Literally has a stick of butter just sitting out. Couldn't have been long, much as that can't be healthy. Leave it to the boys to be insensitive enough to sit down to finish it. They only stop as they hear a noise. A bat suddenly flying out of the chimney. Love Scooby crawling into Shaggy's shirt. Very real dog behavior of him.
He was probably more scared than we were.
As they look for clues, Scooby sniffs his way to the window where this creature is sitting, reflecting into his eyeballs here, and somehow there's a second one at the other window he runs over to as well. He fully passes out, so Shaggy takes this poor fish and tosses it in a glass to take its home and dump that water on him instead of the glass of water. Scoop explains what he saw, but it's kind of crazy they did not see it themselves in all the chaos at both windows. His hooting doesn't get him anywhere, so he tries charades with them to suggest howl. Don't know why he doesn't just say owl, but whatever. The gang don't believe his story of the two big owls, which also doesn't make sense. They literally just saw a big fat round owl themselves moments ago. Fred thankfully is enough of a voice of reason to say he had to see something, so they walk out to check, and Scoop finds several owl feathers. They ask to see where he found them, so they trek into the woods, walking into some feet that belong to this Native American. 3 of them, in fact. Scoop faints in the others and they go down like dominoes. Must be because he's so used to white people pretending to be indigenous instead. Velma tells them she's looking for her uncle, the border guard, and the man in front says he's Red Heron, chief of his tribe, the Chippewa in this case, and apparently a good friend of Uncle Dave. They express their fear for him and how his cabin looks, and finding the feathers, which stands out to Red Heron because they came due to Gray Fox hearing the owl call Dave's name. They believe that when an owl calls your name, the Willawaw swoops out of the sky to carry you away, hence they're coming to check on him. As for what that is, it's that monster they saw fly over them when they arrived. Unfortunately, Red Heron also informs them that one of the gang will be the next victim since they saw it tonight. Shaggy pushing Scooby ahead to hide is crazy. Dog is pissed off at him. Red Heron warns them to go before it comes back and leaves them with that, but Velma refuses to leave without finding her uncle. Back at the lodge, Fred says he and the girls will stay safe in here in case Dave shows up, while the boys will sleep out in the boat as guards. And you can see how much Shaggy's resenting this. Velma bribes them with a couple of Scooby snacks though, one of the earliest times Shaggy is equally bribed with them to start with. They manage to look even more on edge than usual. Just look at these faces. And for good reason it seems. They hear the cry and here comes what very well could be the Willawaw, screeching as it flies all around. The two hide in here and just get distracted playing around for a long while until they hear it again and get back to business. Thankfully, as they look closer, this is just a regular old owl. Yeah, remember, Red Heron says if the owl says your name, the Willawaw is coming for you, so he officially has just been marked. The boys try to hide on the boat, but they hear a cry that for sure has to be the Willawaw this time, and looking out, here it comes for him. Scoop turns on the boat's motor, sending them out on the lake as the others run out to the dock and see it happening. It seems at least to miss them in the chaos, but it's still not safe as they head right toward a cave in the rocks. As we see the cave the boat ran into, we find the boys in total darkness until finding a flashlight to take in their surroundings. They take a look around and see footprints and wheel tracks, so people have definitely been in here. They aren't safe yet though, hearing the Willawaw scream out and run off down the tracks. The others, meanwhile, have managed to make it over near the cave by foot, and with Fred going ahead, Velma sees something's been scratched in the dirt here, believing it to be a Native American pictograph. Uncle Dave taught her them when she was younger, and remembers this one to be a sign for danger. She believes Dave might have left this to warn them, though he easily could have written danger or something specific if he had time to draw all that. They hear a screech that leads their eyes to these two owlmen Scooby saw before, which suddenly start chasing after them. The girls make it to Fred, and they all rush off as the owlmen catch up and chase them deep into a part of the cave, finding a door. They lock it and listen as the owlmen seem to leave, but only for now, so they take in the room. Cans of kerosene and sandbags suspiciously line the walls, likely related to whatever happened to poor Dave. Meanwhile, the boys have followed the tracks to a door, and Shaggy just teleports into non-existence within a single second. Scoop does his famous trick of turning his tail into a key, and then they waste half an hour insisting the other go inside first. They randomly find a bunch of women's fur coats, so obviously Scoop tries one on for some casual drag and gives us a fierce Steve a walk for the runway. The ham then trips and falls into a TV that for sure is not meant to be here. But then also with many of those, they also see all kinds of paintings, hi-fi music systems, silvers, statues, all kinds of fancy stuff. They then get a fright from the owlmen, though it's obviously just costumes of them. Over with the others, they're utilizing what they found to make a big trap for the owlmen the next time they show up. Checking the passageway, Velma hears them coming, so they hide and get ready. The owlmen run in, Fred sets off the trap, and the two of them get caught instantly. Problem is, the owls sound a lot like Shaggy and Scooby, so they tear them down, unmask them, and indeed reveal the boys. They explain they found the costumes in the Cave of Treasures, and tell of all the fur coats and TV sets and jewels and whatnot they found, which starts to shape up this mystery for Velma as she seems to have figured it all out. They need to work fast though, as the screech of the Willawaw rings out for Scooby, though Fred at least is prepared this time as they all head out. We then see Red Heron has traveled into the cave, and finds the others have been here as well. As the trio come out, they see the Willawaw headed right for them, rushing off, while Red Heron traces their tracks. The boys now alone, the Willawaw takes advantage and comes soaring at them, initiating a chase. The trio seem to have prepared a trap here, but as the Willawaw nearly gets the boys, it's not exactly useful yet. Scoob runs off as it stays on his tail, attempting to fulfill what the owl foretold. So the others try to get him to run toward their trap. He makes it over, they start to pull, and he and the Willawaw both get caught in the rope trap, sending he and the big owl flying. The bottom half of the Willawaw, however, looking very much not like a big owl, falls from the sky and crashes. Scooby tries to crawl onto the remainder, but the skin falls off and leaves a big balloon that doesn't take to his claws digging in and pops, sending him out of control. He lands directly on the bottom half and pops out with another man, now wearing an indigenous headdress. They see the man under him is Gray Fox from earlier, secretly the mastermind of an international smuggling ring. They realize this part after hearing about that cave of treasures, and also what the Willawaw had to be when finding the sandbags and kerosene. Those were used for the jet-powered helium balloon we just saw, and the jet engine here made the shriek of the Willawaw. Scooby at least finally takes the headdress off. Gray Fox took advantage of the legend of the Willawaw to frighten away anyone getting too close to his smuggling operation into Canada. Uncle Dave walks up to agree, distractingly voiced by Casey Kasem, voice of Shaggy. He's here with Red Heron, who found where Gray Fox and the Owlman had locked him away, and also managed to capture those two while at it. Velma fills in the blanks from here, that Gray Fox realized Dave had nearly found him out, sent the Owlman to get him in the middle of dinner, and left behind those feathers they found. Red Heron insists those who brought shame upon their tribe will appropriately be punished. So really, the gang probably didn't need to be here. I feel like he would have found Uncle Dave and set him free and took these guys in on his own anyway. Dave starts to take everyone back to his place for a feast. Scoob worries once more that his fate has been resealed, tries to show the owl who's boss with a snarl, and then it does one even worse right back, scaring him up into a tree.
That's the first time I've ever seen a chicken turn into an owl.
And that's Watch Out! The Willawaw! An interesting and certainly different episode. I do feel like some of the logic here and there requires some suspension of disbelief. At every turn there seems to be something that could be easily avoided by making an obvious choice that normally would happen and doesn't, simply for the sake of a joke or to progress the plot in a different direction. Despite that, you do have a fairly basic structure that isn't horribly tossed together. A smuggling ring is pretty par for the course here, and getting rid of someone that is about to expose it is solid logic. What obviously stands out is the choice to have actual indigenous people in the episode, rather than another white man pretending to be a witch doctor of some kind. And despite one of them turning out to be the villain, it balances things out somewhat, as one of them likewise turns out to be a genuine friend. Red Heron saving Uncle Dave and taking out the Owlman without the gang having to do anything about that part. Again, they probably didn't even have to show up. We don't even see the cops get involved here, the chief instead seeing to the punishment of his own people. Considering how cops tend to be, and how indigenous people are treated by the government, regardless of the obvious wrongdoing here, that's honestly probably for the best. Considering how bad the representation has been in the show prior to this episode, which is to say mocking indigenous people or white people simply pretending to be them, this episode nearing the end of 1978 is a definite improvement in that regard. We see them actually existing properly for the first time, and see they can be good or bad just as much as anyone else, and especially that they can coexist as friends that take care of everyone in or out of the tribe. Obviously it's not the best, much room for improvement, but from where things had otherwise been, which at times was pretty dire in this show, the end of the 70s was at least allowing more positive references. The monster here isn't even some ghostly indigenous person like many of the others. It's a monster of folklore, one that does happen to be controlled by a Native American, but on equal representation grounds. There had been some pretty terrible things done and said on this show that we've covered before. This episode has noticeably toned things down and held back from making any genuinely offensive references or statements to the same degree. Maybe Scooby in the headdress, but certainly a screenshot. So, still not the best, but from where it had been, a marked improvement. The setting of the lodge and all the autumn leaves blowing around in the wind on this stormy night really make this a nice location to be in. And our monster itself, even if it's not a real part of folklore, does stand out as memorable to me. At the end of the day, a regular owl is pretty scary to some degree, especially if you see a real one hunting. One big enough to take a person as well, certainly on its own, is pretty frightening, even without it being supernatural, I would say. At the sounds it makes as it's rushing toward you, and it's valid to be afraid of. And the little added touch of the regular owl saying your name to foreshadow that you're next is really nice. It does sort of feel like it could be real folklore. There are a lot of stories where that kind of thing happens. Maybe not invoking something real and dark is for the better anyway. The Owlmen are interesting. They certainly add an extra element if the monster alone isn't doing it for you, but are at the end of the day just henchmen. I feel like people aren't going to take those away as the scary part of this episode a lot of the time. Also, how many relatives does Velma have, and why are we visiting so many of them when it clearly always goes wrong? That happened later in the new Scooby-Doo mysteries we talked about before as well. That's at least 2 others. Why are they always uncles living in some faraway remote cabin or area? Extra shout out to Scooby showing off the fur coat. That and the questionable headdress have always contributed to this being highly memorable to me. A lot of fun moments, like Shaggy getting stuck in this bucket, and the 2 of them just trying to get him free and wasting time while the monster is actively flying all around them, and then Scooby getting stuck as well. Very silly. Overall though, I still wouldn't say this is one of the strongest episodes, especially of this particular show. There are stronger villains and stories out there. This is more of a middle ground. Still worth seeing though. I've checked out many other episodes of the Scooby-Doo Show if you want to see more, like that Viking episode. Like and subscribe if you liked this one. If you want to support the channel directly, the Patreon is now live for that purpose and is appreciated. There are officially exclusive videos covering the entire rest of the first era of movies, Zombie Island, Witch's Ghost, and a new 45-minute 25th anniversary video on Cyber Chase. You can also find videos on episodes 2 and 3 at Clue Club, with more to come, the Wheel of Scooby series, and all that. I guess that's that. I'll see you whenever it is that I next see you. Bye!
Alright.